We have the AFC and NFC championship games set. It's Chiefs-Titans in the AFC, Packers-49ers in the NFC. This league is defined by quarterbacks. This weekend, defined by quarterbacks as well. One quarterback in the AFC reminding the world that he is the best player in the NFL and the baddest dude in the NFL. Another quarterback in the AFC left the door wide open for the critics to come running back in, and they've been waiting there, don't we know it, all season long. Welcome into SB Nation Radio. I am your host, John Kurtz. Tonight, you can find me on Twitter at JLKurtz. The Chiefs and Ravens both found themselves in similar spots in the playoffs this weekend. Two top seeds, heavy favorites at home, down double digits to the underdog. One of these quarterbacks, this one being Patrick Mahomes, wound up not just winning the game, but leading by halftime and winning the game by 20 points after trailing by 24. The other quarterback never really made you feel like his team was truly in it in the second half, and that is Lamar Jackson. Let's deal with Mahomes first. That scenario makes sense to me that the Chiefs are the team to come back for a number of reasons. One, the style of Mahomes, a better pure passer than Lamar Jackson. But above all else, it's because Patrick Mahomes has always been, since he stepped foot in this league, the best quarterback in the NFL and the best player in the NFL. Patrick Mahomes completed 23 of 35 passes, 321 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. Mahomes the first ever in a playoff game. First ever with 300-plus passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and at least 50 rushing yards as well. Oh, yeah, he led the Chiefs in rushing in their win over the Houston Texans, 51-31. Mahomes filled up that highlight reel again. You saw the throw where he drags the back foot to stay behind the line of scrimmage to deliver a touchdown pass to Travis Kelce. It was a historic game for Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Quarterbacks in the playoffs who trailed by 21 after the first quarter were previously 0-6, and if you take that and extrapolate it out through the regular season, 8-135 rather all time. Patrick Mahomes not just stamped himself as the one to win that game in the playoffs and the ninth to ever do it, but he won the game by 20. Now, it was not 100% Patrick Mahomes. It was about 90 to 95% Patrick Mahomes with a little hockey assist to Bill O'Brien, Houston Texans head coach. More on him later on in the show. But the Chiefs at one point were rightfully booed by their fans in this game, and for good reason. Kansas City fans know the Chiefs were 1-7 in their previous 8 home playoff games. They've dealt with the no-punt game with Peyton Manning and the Colts. The Steelers winning a playoff game at Arrowhead in 2016 without scoring a touchdown. 21-3 blown lead to Marcus Mariota. There was every reason for that. And because of that, there's a pretty powerful and palpable force in the stadium at Arrowhead of nervous energy from the fans all the way down. And that trickles down to players. And the Chiefs were dropping passes. There was a punt block. There was a muff punt by Tyreek Hill. It was Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce who were two of the culprits in all of this. So if you're Patrick Mahomes, any mere mortal quarterback, what do you do when you're down 24-0 and a big chunk of the reason is your go-to tight end and your all-world wide receiver in Tyreek Hill? The answer is for Patrick Mahomes, you go calm everybody down on the sideline, which we saw. The CBS camera crew did a great job of that, and you saw the intangibles at work for Patrick Mahomes before we got to see the gun show and the arm that he actually has and the arm talent and what he does with his skill on the field. Patrick Mahomes merely being there on the sideline is such a boost for his team because they know, and they have not forgotten this whole time, that Mahomes is the baddest dude on the planet and certainly in the NFL. All right? Patrick Mahomes being there elevates the play of everybody else. Everybody else rises up. Everybody else calms down in a situation like that because they know they have a quarterback capable of bringing them back better than anybody else in the league. Frank Clark, Chiefs defensive end, I think said it perfectly.
And when it comes out rough and just keeping it real, you come out rough, you feel the pressure. Most guys feel the pressure. Like I said before, man, thank God we got Pat Mahomes because if we didn't, I'm not sure the results would be the same.
Thank God we have Patrick Mahomes should be a T-shirt. That should be a T-shirt in Kansas City, and you all can thank me later. The rah-rah speeches and the calming down stuff on the sideline, it doesn't mean much if you can't play, if you can't ball. Patrick Mahomes can ball, and so people listen. That's a powerful force, and it was on display, and to me accentuates why he is the best player in the NFL. Let's look at the tail of the tape right now. Patrick Mahomes is 24 years old, 2 years as a starter, He's thrown for over 9,000 yards, 76 touchdowns. He's won 26 games, back-to-back AFC championship games now, and possibly more for the Chiefs if they can beat the Tennessee Titans. It's easy to see why everybody did forget, right? This was a year where Patrick Mahomes flew under the radar for most of the season. He did miss 2 full games and most of a third with that dislocated kneecap. That kind of put him out of sight, out of mind. He also dealt with a nagging ankle injury for the first part of the season. Tyreek Hill missed a month. Eric Fisher, Patrick Mahomes' left tackle, missed half the season. And yet, Patrick Mahomes still put up a season that in some ways was more efficient than his 2018 record-setting season. The only 2 games in which Patrick Mahomes had a full complement of healthy players this year, the Chiefs actually scored touchdowns at a higher rate. Their points per drive was higher than it was for 2018 when the Chiefs set the world on fire with the offense that they put out there in the NFL. And Patrick Mahomes, despite all of that adversity, made it back to the AFC Championship game. I think another thing that accentuates Mahomes being the best player in the NFL is just juxtaposing his performance with what we saw from Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson. Not that Deshaun Watson was bad, and Deshaun Watson has a worse situation with his head coach and the infrastructure and everything that's in place there in Houston, but Deshaun Watson did not have the power to get his team back into the game once Patrick Mahomes took control at 28-24. He does not quite have the consistent level of excellence right now that Patrick Mahomes does. Watson's good enough to win a Super Bowl. Watson can match some of the highlight reel stuff that Patrick Mahomes does, and that's always going to be there. But right now, Patrick Mahomes is still clearly a notch above, and he proved that head-to-head. Then Lamar Jackson, on display the night before. Lamar Jackson, I think, deserves the MVP, had a phenomenal season, but again, not at the level that Patrick Mahomes is. You don't have the confidence that when Lamar Jackson falls behind, certainly in a playoff game now after what we've seen in 2 opportunities for Lamar Jackson there, he has not shown the ability to be able to take his team back and give his team the unending confidence that they are never out of the game. So Jackson wholeheartedly deserves the MVP this year, but you know deep down Patrick Mahomes is the better quarterback, and it probably doesn't even take thinking deep down. I think right now everybody realized what I have realized for the entire season, and that is there's no doubt in my mind. You give me one quarterback to go win a game right now in the playoffs, I'm taking Patrick Mahomes. There's no hesitation about that. I'm not thinking about Aaron Rodgers. I'm not thinking about Russell Wilson, although he's probably second to me, and certainly not Deshaun Watson or Lamar Jackson. Everybody, gun to their head right now, is taking Patrick Mahomes. He just reminded everybody of that fact with his performance in the divisional round of the playoffs. Having said all of that, we do need to find some middle ground here on Lamar Jackson and chill out a little bit. Lamar Jackson is not Patrick Mahomes. That's already been established here. But Lamar Jackson's also not Johnny Manziel either. And you know that the Sharks were circling the waters, waiting for Lamar Jackson to lose a game in the playoffs. It happened to the Titans. It happened in fairly ugly fashion, even though Lamar Jackson did rack up 300 yards passing, 100 yards rushing. It was a somewhat hollow performance from Jackson in that regard. But the Sharks have been circling the waters because so many were wrong about Lamar Jackson in the first place. Nobody thought Jackson would turn into the NFL MVP this year, and deservedly so. Jackson absolutely dazzled this year. He deserves the MVP wholeheartedly. But people were so wrong on Lamar Jackson. Bill Polian famously, obviously, called him a wide receiver. There have been a ton that never thought a quarterback that utilizes the legs the way Lamar Jackson does, one, would be able to stay healthy, and two, would be able to perform at the level that he did throughout the regular season anyway. Went 14-2. All right, the Ravens were fantastic this year because of Lamar Jackson. He put a lot of egg on a lot of faces this year. And speaking of egg, Lamar Jackson's not off the hook here either. Lamar was not great in this playoff game. There was clearly some rust. Some bad drops didn't help him either, but some bad throws and a number of wobbly passes thrown by Lamar Jackson in this game. The Ravens had some bad luck on 4th down, honestly, when they have been pretty good in those 4th and short situations. And this does now get bookended by the performance last year in the playoffs against the Los Angeles Chargers for Lamar Jackson, and you can connect the two. Jackson has not been good in the playoffs. Yes, that is a key to being a great quarterback in the NFL. It will have to get better for Lamar Jackson in his career. But this does happen sometimes, guys. It doesn't mean that Lamar Jackson is a terrible quarterback because at 23, he has not been able to yet win a playoff game. 4 times in the past 15 years, according to ESPN Stats and Info, the MVP-winning quarterback has lost his first playoff game. The other 3 on the list, Brady, Manning, Rodgers. So it has happened, and it's happened to some of the greats. And Peyton Manning did not win a playoff game until it was his 6th year in the NFL. And in fact, leading up to that, Peyton Manning blew a 14-point lead to Jay Fiedler in the playoffs. In the first playoff game Peyton Manning competed in, he completed 45% of his passes. So it has taken some of the greats enough time to get to this point and get over the hump that they can still be considered a great, and Lamar Jackson can still be considered a great, even if it hasn't come instantly, the success in the playoffs. A player's career is never going to be defined by 1 or 2 games, okay? Even in the positive, with Patrick Mahomes, his career will not be defined by that Titans game, but that Titans game accentuated everything that does define him as an excellent player. Lamar Jackson's still an excellent player. He's not going to be defined by these 2 playoff losses when he is, again, 23 years old. One of the most amazing stats out there, he is younger than Joe Burrow, the quarterback of the LSU Tigers, who will compete for the national championship coming up here. All right? Lamar Jackson in the regular season this year rushed for over 1,200 yards, 43 total touchdowns, 3,000 plus passing yards. And if you're talking about the arm, I know it wasn't there in the playoff game, and that will have to get better. But Jackson was first in QBR and third in passer rating in the league this year. So he has proven something with his arm so far to this point in his career. Lamar Jackson is an absolute deserving MVP of the league, and that does not change despite what happened in this game. Colin Cowherd from Fox Sports Radio did tweet this out in the aftermath of the game. Quote, "Lots of NFL executives who read that they should be fired for not drafting Lamar sooner are having a second cocktail tonight, maybe a third. I got news for you. If you are an exec in the NFL and you're not an exec for the Chiefs, Packers, Texans, Seahawks, or Saints, you are still wrong. If you didn't draft Lamar Jackson and you're not from one of those teams, you're still wrong because you do not have a quarterback that is better than Lamar Jackson. So let's not over-exaggerate that point. Let's not over-exaggerate that line of thinking that Lamar Jackson, all of a sudden, it's been proven right that he is not a quarterback capable of winning in this league. That ain't true. At the same time, I don't think we need to go overboard and completely forgive this playoff performance from Lamar Jackson either, because it was not good. It was not good enough to beat the 9-7 Tennessee Titans. But when the dust settles on this year and we think about Lamar Jackson's career and where it's at right now through this point, he's proven he's more than a gimmick. He still hasn't dealt with the supposed inevitable injury issues. Now he just needs to take that next step, which is winning in the playoffs. Coming up here on SB Nation Radio, the critical mistake that predictably Pete Carroll made that cost his team the NFC title game. In the NFC, the Packers held off the Seahawks 28-23 to get to the NFC title game. Meanwhile, starting all this off, the Vikings get bludgeoned by the 49ers 27-10. Kirk Cousins, the legend of Kirk Cousins, lasts 1 week before it's back to being a pumpkin for poor Kirk Cousins and company. As far as this Packers-Seahawks game goes, to me, again, it comes down to the quarterbacks and the quarterback-coach marriages. To me, there's one marriage here that seems to be heating up and one that is really on the rocks. Welcome in again to SB Nation Radio tonight. I am John Kurtz, your host. You can find me on Twitter at JLKurtz. Definitely seems like at this point we can all step back and realize the relationship between Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers has been something good for Rodgers this year and for the Packers in general. Mike McCarthy, I still think, is a pretty good coach. Maybe not worthy of that Cowboys job. That may not have been the best pick for Jerry Jones and company, but still, I do think McCarthy is a good coach. Things get stale, though. Long marriages, it happens. After a while, you get tired of the person. You get tired of their flaws. Clearly, there was some untenable aspects of the relationship between Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers by the end of it. Back-to-back sub-500 seasons after getting trounced by the Falcons in the NFC Championship game, and then Aaron Rodgers had an injury issue in there as well in 2017. Aaron Rodgers got the new hot young thing, right? The new relationship comes in. It's Matt LaFleur, and things are different. I don't know if this relationship is going to last long term. Rodgers isn't always the easiest guy in the world to get along with, but right now it seems like things are pretty damn good with the Packers in the NFC Championship game, despite the fact that it is different. Matt LaFleur has not been one to utilize Aaron Rodgers' talents in the way that puts up the gaudy statistics that we're used to for Aaron Rodgers. And trust me when I say, as a Rodgers fantasy owner this year, I am well aware of that fact. And Aaron Rodgers is aging. The dude's 36 years old. This was not a vintage Aaron Rodgers season. But when the Packers have needed him, in particular, late in the game against the Seahawks, after the Seahawks come charging back, Aaron Rodgers uncorks some vintage Aaron Rodgers to win the game. The throw on 3rd and 8, and I love the fact that LaFleur trusted Aaron Rodgers in this situation, uncorks a perfect throw to Davante Adams. Aaron Rodgers off his back foot hits Jimmy Graham for the late controversial first down that totally iced things here. Rodgers was still there to be the closer when the Packers needed it. And you know what? Maybe having a team led by a much improved defense that went from 29th to 15th in DVOA this year, a solid running game for the Packers as well with Aaron Jones, maybe that's the way to help age Aaron Rodgers gracefully in the twilight of his career. It's been 3 seasons since Aaron Rodgers had a passer rating of over 100. At one point, Rodgers did that in 6 straight years. Maybe it's not totally the same guy right now. And in fact, it may have cost the Packers in this game, the fact that things are a little bit different right now. I don't think the Packers are a vastly superior team to the Seattle Seahawks, but they did get some help from Pete Carroll and company in the marriage that seems to be on the rocks here. That's Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson. Green Bay is a better team than Seattle, but Pete Carroll certainly did not maximize his team's chance of winning this game because Pete Carroll is still too stuck in his conservative ways. They're deeply ingrained in that 68-year-old brain of Pete Carroll, who had Marshawn Lynch pulled off the streets out of a limo full of Skittles into the Seahawks backfield, carrying the ball 12 times, even though Marshawn Lynch averaged 2.2 yards per carry. The Seahawks fell behind 21-3, with Carroll being predictably conservative. And then all of a sudden, Pete Carroll, realizing the direness of this situation, uncorks Russell Wilson and takes the shackles off in the second half. And guess what happened? Russell Wilson, who I think is the second best quarterback in the NFL right now, was excellent. 15 of 18, 172 yards and a touchdown in the second half. He also rushed for 48 yards in the second half. And what did Seattle do? The first 3 drives of the second half to get back into the game, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Pete Carroll's been a great coach in the NFL, Super Bowl champ. He took the Seahawks to multiple Super Bowls, but clearly we all know he's a guy with conservative roots. We saw how he won the title in 2013. That's vintage Marshawn Lynch, the Legion of Boom, and then a young Russell Wilson still on a rookie contract. The Seahawks now are a team with a quarterback that has a $31 million cap hit next year. That's Russell Wilson. He's being paid like a franchise quarterback because he is a franchise quarterback. He is the guy right now. The defense does not have Richard Sherman or Earl Thomas anymore on it. The backfield, albeit better, obviously, when Chris Carson was healthy, and there were some health issues there that really limited what was available to Seattle in the backfield, but they're not the stars of the show. Are you going to put the game in the hands of Russell Wilson or Chris Carson, even if we're talking about a regular season game for the Seattle Seahawks? The problem is, Pete Carroll right now is reminiscent to me of a story from my childhood. I had this old ratty baseball hat that I wore all the time in high school. Never took it off. Wore it for years. Had it since middle school. My mom hated it. Absolutely hated it. And always was trying to get me to wear something else. It got to the point where my mom actually bought me a brand new hat. It was the same hat. Texas Rangers, for whatever reason, a baseball team that I had played on. The old ratty version was replaced by my mom with a brand new era fitted cap. Those hats that cost like $35, far too expensive. And you know what? I still wore the old one. Because even though the new one looks shinier and better and nicer and all of those things, and you could tell me all these great things about it, I was so damn attached to the old hat. Okay? I was so attached to the old hat and so used to wearing it, I didn't want to change. And at that point, I was about 16 years old. Pete Carroll's 68. Pete Carroll's a 68-year-old head coach at this point. So I don't think that you're going to teach an old dog new tricks. All right? I don't think Pete Carroll is really changing at this point. And that's going to create a difficult situation for Seattle moving forward. You saw it come to fruition at the worst time for Seahawks and their fans in this game as they do lose. But now what do you do moving forward with Pete Carroll? To be honest, I think this is a sports radio topic, and it's fairly moot because Pete Carroll is a guy that's been to 7 playoffs in the last 8 years, a Super Bowl winning coach. There still is a high floor, I think, with Pete Carroll. Players still play very hard for him. Clearly has a good culture going in Seattle. I don't think Pete Carroll is going anywhere, but the ceiling for Pete Carroll appears to be getting progressively lower and lower, and Pete Carroll deserves a lot of heat for how he handled that game, and I think cost the Seahawks a legitimate chance to win. I, as a viewer, would have much preferred to watch Russell Wilson be unshackled from the start, and then game on. Russell Wilson v. Aaron Rodgers. Let's see what happens out there in that game. Instead, the Packers somewhat comfortably move on to go take on the San Francisco 49ers, who, by the way, with all of this discussion in the NFC, I do have to come in and say the 49ers have to be considered a decided favorite over the Green Bay Packers in this NFC title game. Made quick work of Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. Outside of one early throw for Kirk Cousins, there was nothing there. It got to the point Kirk Cousins got his "you like that?" thrown back in his face by Richard Sherman, running off to the sideline after an interception. Now, I'm not saying that Kirk Cousins I ever believed was somebody who was transcendentally changed after his win over the New Orleans Saints, but Kirk Cousins' legend did last for a week. There was a lot of buzz about Cousins. The Vikings have been a pretty good team this year, and the 49ers defense just mauled the Minnesota Vikings. Only 147 total yards for Cousins and company offensively. That 49ers defense is nasty. That was a franchise playoff record for the 49ers to only allow 147 yards. You know that you pair that with the 49ers with a good running game that rushed for nearly 200 yards. That's been the story all year with 3 really capable running backs. I'm not a huge believer in Jimmy G necessarily, but he did enough and limited his mistakes enough. There was one pretty bad pick from Jimmy G, which it seems like he's good for every single game. But with the defense playing the way it is right now, with the running game playing the way it is right now, with just enough sprinkled in from Jimmy G and the kicker here, Kyle Shanahan, who appears to be a total stud as the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, that to me is a recipe, even in a day that's defined by quarterbacks, an era that's defined by quarterbacks. I think the team with the worst quarterback going into that NFC title game should be the decided favorite because of all those factors there. When we come back here on SB Nation Radio, just because Patrick Mahomes is the best out there doesn't mean that Bill O'Brien is off the hook. Houston head coach Bill O'Brien, after losing to the Chiefs and blowing a 20-point lead, is taking a lot of heat, and deservedly so. You go open the Houston Chronicle right now, lead columnist calling for Bill O'Brien to be fired, another calling for Bill O'Brien to resign. Let's be clear about something first. Bill O'Brien did not lose this game for the Houston Texans. The Texans lost the game because the Chiefs are a vastly superior team. But that doesn't mean Bill O'Brien isn't still a problem and doesn't still need to go in Houston. Back here on SB Nation Radio, I am John Kurtz. You can find me on Twitter at JL Kurtz. It's as simple as this, okay? The Texans were outscored 51-7 by the Kansas City Chiefs after jumping out to that early lead. I don't care who you are. That doesn't happen unless you are an inferior team to your opponent. You are not getting outscored 51-7 at some point in a football game unless you are the inferior team. So because of that, the Chiefs so overwhelmed the Houston Texans that I will not put this loss on Bill O'Brien as being the primary reason for the loss. In fact, it was a fluky start. The only reason the Chiefs were down 24-0 is they gave up 14 points on special teams, a blocked punt, and Tyreek Hill, who typically does not return punts, was not clearly used to it, a little bit rusty, dropped a punt that set up an easy touchdown for the Ravens. Then there were a couple of drops by the Kansas City Chiefs and a busted coverage in the secondary that gave the Texans an easy score. It was a fluky start. And then the Chiefs got rolling. Okay, so if we're splitting a pie of who deserves the most blame for the loss or who deserves the most credit for the win, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, let's put it that way. Who deserves the most credit for the win for the Chiefs? 80% Patrick Mahomes, 10% Andy Reid, 10% Bill O'Brien. So Bill O'Brien was not the reason that the Texans lost this game. The problem for Bill O'Brien is that even out of that pie, 10% is still a big issue. As a head coach, your job is to put your team in the best position to succeed. And Bill O'Brien definitely did not do that. Not just in this game, but throughout the course of the year. Bill O'Brien went 10-6 with a team this year with Deshaun Watson still playing at an elite level at quarterback, DeAndre Hopkins still in his prime. I know J.J. Watt dealt with injuries, but you do still have J.J. Watt in his prime. There's a lot of talent in Houston, and the Texans went 10-6, needed Deshaun Watson heroics to sneak past Buffalo, and then blew a 20-point lead in a historic collapse in the playoffs to the Chiefs. Bill O'Brien made one big mistake and then magnified it. He then took gasoline and dumped it on that fire. It was a mistake for Bill O'Brien to not go for it on 4th and inches from the Chiefs' 13-yard line, up 21-0. You are not going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs with field goals. A field goal turns it into a 3-possession game as opposed to a 3-possession game, which it already was. And strike while the iron's hot. And more importantly, strike while the Chiefs are back on their heels trying to gather their composure, which at that point the Chiefs did not have. Bill O'Brien should have gone for it there in that situation with a quarterback like Deshaun Watson. There are so many things that you can do in that situation. But the bigger problem there is that once Bill O'Brien creates that fire, he throws gasoline on it by then, after not being aggressive, being too aggressive, and faking a punt at his own 31-yard line on 4th and 4. Can't do that, Bill O'Brien. Either be aggressive or don't. But once you take the gasoline and throw it on that fire and you've tried to merge two philosophies, being ultra-conservative and being too aggressive, now everything is just worse. It's like, it reminds me, you tell a white lie to your significant other, right? It starts out as just one white lie. But then later, you're forced with a scenario where you have to make another white lie just to cover up for it. And now you're in it even deeper. You've made it worse. Whereas you could have just manned up, admitted to it, and gotten rid of the problem at just one white lie. Bill O'Brien could have just punted the football in that scenario. But instead, that 1-2 combo, that 1-2 punch, bam, bam, did get the Chiefs jump-started and back into the game. And here's Bill O'Brien's explanation on both calls, which, frankly, I don't really like either of them.
And I just decided to kick the field goal. Yeah, I was thinking about challenging the spot because I felt like I had a first down. So, and by the time I got to it was a 4th down, I just decided to kick the field goal. We just we felt like we weren't going to be able to punt it too many times today. We felt like that we had to try to manufacture some points, manufacture some yards, and just didn't work out. It's just something we decided to do, but the play didn't work. We felt like.
Okay, again, Bill O'Brien, you wanted to be aggressive, but then yet you did not follow through with that on the 4th and inches call. We know, Bill O'Brien, by the way, that you can be aggressive, as evidenced by that TMZ video of you arguing with a fan on your way out while your team's getting housed at home by the Denver Broncos. 31-3, I believe, was the score at that point in time. So we know you have it in you, Bill O'Brien. The good news for Bill O'Brien is that he did get a ringing endorsement from the most important man in the franchise, by far, Deshaun Watson, after the game.
No doubt. I mean, you might have doubt, but there's no doubt. I mean, I love that man. I'm going to play hard for that man. And, I mean, y'all can say whatever y'all want to say, through all the media and all the writing. But as long as I'm at quarterback, he's cool with me. He's got my heart. He's going to get all my 110% every time I step on that field. So y'all can say whatever, but I'm going to always be rooting for that man and going to play hard for him. So
now that's all fine and good, and that certainly is important in a way for Bill O'Brien to get that out of Deshaun Watson, who was classy and composed as always. And I know there are some out there who would tell you that Bill O'Brien played a pretty instrumental role in developing Deshaun Watson as a quarterback. I suppose that's all well and good, but does anybody out there watching this actually think Bill O'Brien is getting the most out of Deshaun Watson? Watson is an elite talent. He was going to be good no matter who his head coach was. And Bill O'Brien is not somebody that is getting every possible last inch that he can out of Deshaun Watson right now. Did Houston get the most out of Deshaun Watson this year in going 10-6, squeaking past the Bills, and then blowing a 20-point lead in the playoffs to the Chiefs? Or did Deshaun Watson just will his team past the Buffalo Bills in 2-10 wins in spite of his head coach? Because I will take option number 2 there. if you've ever seen football players, sprinters out there running with the giant parachutes that pop off the back as they're sprinting and create some wind resistance there, that's the Texans trying to win in spite of Bill O'Brien. If we view Deshaun Watson in the same quarterback tier as Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, which one of those three quarterbacks would we say was woefully underaccomplished compared to the other two this year? Well, of course, it's Deshaun Watson. Lamar Jackson won 14 games and is going to be the NFL MVP. Patrick Mahomes, despite playing through injuries to not only himself but his best playmakers and protectors, is back in the AFC Championship game for a second straight year. Deshaun Watson, out of the playoffs after a collapse. If not for Deshaun Watson's utter heroics after a disaster of a start for Bill O'Brien and the Texans in that playoff game against the Bills, O'Brien's seat would be even hotter right now. And here's the resume for Bill O'Brien in the playoffs right now with, a reminder again, Deshaun Watson, J.J. Watt, and DeAndre Hopkins in their primes. This is what Bill O'Brien has done in the playoffs. Lost 30-0 at home to the Chiefs in the 2015 playoffs. Lost 21-7 in the 2018 playoffs to the Colts and got booed off the field. Trailed Buffalo 16-0 until Deshaun Watson clicked on hero mode. And then gave up 28 second quarter points to the Chiefs on Sunday and lost 51-31. Texans fans, I feel your pain. Bill O'Brien needs to go. And Deshaun Watson's prime, in large part, is going to be squandered if Houston does not do something about Bill O'Brien soon. So sign me up, along with the Houston Chronicle, as in the crowd of thinking Bill O'Brien needs to be gone.